Next, we have one of Ohio's longtime television personalities, Joe Holbrook. Joe spent more than 40 years as chief meteorologist for WBNS, and we are lucky to have this Ohio legend with us today. Joe, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. Glad to be here.
Now, when did you realize that you first wanted to be a communicator?
Well, I think I was in high school, and I was working at a catering service, which did the catering for the radio station in Portsmouth, Ohio. And the lady cornered the general manager and said, "You see that boy over there?" I said, "Yeah." Said, "He's in all those class plays, and you ought to have him on the radio." And the manager says, "Oh, okay. Tell him to come down sometime. We'll give him an audition. Pass the mashed potatoes." So that's how it all started. Well, I didn't know I couldn't do that, so I did go in for an audition. So he hired me when I was in high school as a night radio announcer.
Oh, that's great. How would you define your role as a communicator through all those years you were on air?
We gave mostly information. Of course, commercials are a form of, I think, teaching or telling or pointing out things. Mostly, as far as the weather is concerned, we were constantly explaining such things as a low pressure or what a front was going to do, what is a front, and what's the cold air going to mean to us, and trying to relate it to the individuals, people listening at home and watching at home. And I would say that we were constantly talking information.
Right. Now, how obligated do you feel as a person to bring an important subject to your audience, whoever your audience may be at that time?
Well, I think it's very important. I think really it's necessary. Now, if we're talking about news, that's important. I think what you might be talking about is the possibility of severe weather, how it might affect people. We used to travel to the National Severe Storms Forecast Center and the National Severe Storms Laboratory and do stories about how they go about forecasting the severe storms and what to look for, what to do in case of the emergency, how to protect yourself, and that sort of thing.
Right. And how important in all that is it to be as accurate as possible when bringing that to your audience?
Oh, well, you really, it would be unthinkable not to be accurate. Unfortunately, there would be mistakes made. Information would come across that could be wrong or something like that that you would put on the air, but we get pretty savvy after a while that we don't put things on the air without thinking them through or without checking them. It would be unthinkable to just put information on the air that you didn't know was true. The National Weather Service, of course, provides severe storms information, and since they have many hundreds of people working for them, we certainly accepted their word of a severe storm in the area. Unfortunately, with the earlier technology, they were almost always behind. Later on, when we got our, first of all, black and white radar, then we went to color radar, and then we went to Doppler radar, we were able to follow the severe storms and know pretty much where they were. And information on the teletype machines and so forth were usually a little bit behind because there was no way they could keep up with it. But, for example, a storm might travel 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and with the radar we could see where it exactly was. And we would mention that the National Weather Service has pointed out that this is a heavy storm, and now it has progressed toward Newark or somewhere, and you can expect some real problems from this. So radar was a wonderful thing to have.
And definitely helped add to accuracy.
Yes, very definitely. Radar is something that's going on now. It's like looking out the window and seeing something. Radar is not necessarily that valuable in forecasting. However, you could say, with the radar, you could forecast because you knew where the storm is now, and if it's traveling 50 miles an hour, then you could estimate where the weather would be. But a radar would be useless in forecasting weather for tomorrow.
Right, right. Kind of in the broad sense of news today, because you were a part of it for so long and saw the news business change so much in your years at WBNS, how much of the news today do you feel is important news, and how much do you feel is tabloid, celebrity stuff?
Well, I think there's a certain amount of it that is designed to be attention-getting. But I don't think that the television news people, and that's who I would speak for with my experience, they would not set out to be inaccurate or to give wrong information, but they would market or merchandise the information that they had a great deal more than we used to.
Right. What do you feel is the increase for that, the reason for the increase?
Competition. Originally, when I first came to work, which was in 1950, there was Channel 10. Well, let's put it this way, there was 4, 6, and 10, and the Ohio State University, or WOSU, had the 4th station. That's all there was. And now, of course, with the advent of cable, it has fragmented the audience tremendously, and as a result, it has become much more competitive. And so they're always doing things for an edge. And the TV station, for example, Channel 10, has the only helicopter which is on call at all times, which helps in the broadcasting. And they have spent a great deal of money with equipment in the field. We just had one news photographer in the early days. Now we have about 15 or 20. And we have about that many news cars, plus the live capabilities. So it costs a lot of money to be competitive, and all the stations are forced to do it in one way or another.
Right. Is it ever appropriate to use humor when conveying an important story to an audience?
Of course. Now, there's a difference between comedy, humor, and nonsense. A certain amount of humor, I did that a lot. I did a lot of humor in the weather because most of the time the weather is not that serious. So you certainly do want to have a bit of humor in things that you're doing, or at least to be very light in doing the weather. Now, if it is a serious news story, of course, that would be unthinkable. And you would not have humor if there were tornadoes present or heavy thunderstorms. You just wouldn't do that, or heavy snow or blizzards. There's no humor involved there. There's a place for humor, and that's not it.
Right. Now, I kind of want to get your opinion on this, kind of as such an elder statesman with the news business. What's your take on the statistics that have come out about more people are getting their news from Jon Stewart and The Daily Show than the evening newscast?
Well, I couldn't comment on that. I wouldn't have the slightest idea. I have no idea who Jon Stewart is. Who is he?
Oh, he's the Comedy Central Daily Show anchor. And, yeah, and there was a recent story that came out that more younger people were looking to him for the news than the evening newscast, and his news is kind of all comedy.
I couldn't comment on that. I have not seen the latest information on that. I haven't been privy to it since I've been retired for a number of years.
Right.
So I wouldn't have any idea, but I think people are looking certainly for a certain amount of entertainment, and news can sometimes be boring, so you really have to keep up with the times. And if that's the case, then the evening news better change and start looking or start doing something that would attract the younger viewers.
Right. Which I think is the Katie Couric thing, the Katie Couric factor now.
Well, that's possible. There are some schools of thought on that. On the one side, she is very likable, and she has been very popular on the morning news. On the other side of it, the evening news is a very hard news story, and they wonder that if her light approach is going to be accepted she wouldn't be able to do some of the fashion shows and that sort of thing that she did in the morning. But I'm sure that she'll react to it. That's possible that the younger crowd might want to follow her.
Right. Has there ever been a time when you used your function as a communicator just to get across an issue that was important to yourself?
Such as campaigning for this or that?
Yeah, just kind of, or maybe a cause or a charity, or just something that was important to you that you felt important to bring to other people.
Yes. Many years ago, I did many speeches on the use of ethanol. That was very important. Now, it certainly wasn't earth-shaking, but I always felt that it was so important to think about ethanol as an alternate fuel because it just makes a lot of sense. It is a renewable resource, and if it were used more, the farmers would be very happy. They could grow more corn, there would be less pollution, and so on. And I did a campaign on that for quite some time. I really didn't go out, campaign is perhaps the wrong word. I just used that in my talks, and the farmers certainly agreed with me. And the thought at that time was that the engines in the cars would not accept a very high level of ethanol. And then my thought was, well, make an engine that will. And now it's been interesting to see the turn toward ethanol, that people are beginning to talk about that. And this was many years ago, 15 or 20 years ago, when I was doing this.
Right. Definitely. That's definitely a major issue right now with gas prices and such.
Yes.
How much personal bias and opinion is present in the communicator when reporting the story to the audience?
That's a tough question. There's probably always going to be a feeling some people would feel, but you know, they're really good newscasters. You never know their political affiliation. You never know their feeling or what. But there have at times been certain presenters of the news, as the old saying goes, that they would read a story and with a raised eyebrow would create an opinion. And that's not acceptable.
Definitely not. What do you feel is the biggest misconception by the audience about what is considered to be the news?
I don't know. I really wouldn't have an answer for that.
Just to kind of change gears here for a second, was there ever a teacher that was important to you?
Yes. I had several teachers, and one of them was a teacher that I had in the 6th grade who urged me to do public speaking and that sort of thing. I never realized that as a result that's what I'd be doing for a living, but he encouraged me tremendously. And the teachers I had in high school I thought were wonderful, and I think that students in those days were a lot more respectful of their teachers than they are at this time. And we really appreciated our teachers. Didn't always agree with them, but I think we did appreciate what they were doing for us.
Right. Do you think that's a change in society, kind of the same thing with what is considered to be the news, about just what people want and act? I mean, because I'm sure you've seen society as a whole over the last 50 years on a broad scale. Is it just society's changing, do you think?
Oh, yes, I think so. Yes, society is much more liberal. And, yes, I think that's happening.
Right. And now kind of the final question, kind of where this has all been headed, just the blank question of, are communicators educators, and why?
I think they very definitely are. I think that's their role every day, is to educate people, to provide information. What is education? Are you educated to hear that there are 3 automobile accidents in Reynoldsburg? Or are you educated to hear that this low pressure area is going to be here? And remember, with low pressures and cold fronts, you can expect high winds, and very definitely my area, of course, is weather. And I think that news and weather are constantly educating. and that people can accept this information, use it if they wish, or ignore it, whatever, if it catches their fancy, and so on. But I think people in the media, the communicators, are constantly teaching.
Definitely. And that's all the questions I have for you, but I want to say before I let you go here that Joe Holbrook meant so much to Ohio in the years he put in meteorology at WBNS, and I had the chance to meet him a few weeks ago here, and it was a true pleasure, and it's always nice to meet somebody you watch on television all those years, and they turn out to be just as nice as you'd expect them to be. So I really do appreciate you being here with us today, Joe, and I appreciate all the time we've had together.
Well, Scott, it goes the other way, too. I met you at the gathering we had there for the Diabetes Association in Marion, and I think it's young people like you who will be our future that we can put our trust in.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Holbrook. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Holbrook.